you know, and our community of supporters. And a few of us on the team for some time now have been thinking about how do we educate and engage our community in the same way that we do our learners. So I'm excited to have this opportunity to have Lauren with us here today and walk you guys through a unit of our new tech justice curriculum. I also have my colleague Samia here with me, who some of you might also know, but I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Samia, the Program and Partnerships Manager here at Hack the Hood. I work closer with our community organizations and education partners, and excited to be here and have you all with us today. Thank you.
And some of you probably have heard a bit about our tech justice curriculum, but I guess what I'll share is that it's really the way that we keep racial justice at the core of how we teach technical skills. It's the way we contextualize learning in our learners' lived experiences, put the contributions of Black and Brown communities at the forefront of tech learning, and help our learners understand how to advocate for more just and inclusive tech design. So we've been delivering this with our programs and our learners this year, and we've already seen just the ways that it lights up our learners' interest in technology in a really new and exciting way. And Dr. Lauren Thomas Quigley, who we have with us today, has been the genius behind this curriculum. She's been with us for over a year now and is just so much more than a curriculum consultant to us. She's right alongside us in programs teams meetings. She's asking the tough questions. She's pushing us to be thoughtful. And the thing I appreciate the most about her is she's always the first to ask, like, how is this educational experience impacting our learners' sense of identity, their confidence in their abilities? How's it drawing connections to their lived experience in communities? So when you take kind of her learner-centric lens and really just the depth of her knowledge and experience, you get something special, which is this curriculum. So I'll hand it over to her to introduce herself and take it from here.
Thanks, Anina. That's overly generous of a introduction. But I'm really happy just to spend a little time to give you all an overview of one of the modules of our socio-technical curriculum. From my perspective, it gives the heart and uniqueness of Hack the Hood. Everyone can teach technical skills. Everyone can teach people how to code, but not everyone is able to really bring together some of these identity, cultural competence components and relevance to lived experiences. So I'm really proud of the work that we've done, lots of brainstorming across the team. So I'll try to pretend to be a full teacher today. I usually don't teach our curriculum. Henry and Jose are our instructors, and they teach this every day. So I hope that I can live up to their standard, but I want to give you a little bit of teaching, but also a little bit of thinking behind the curriculum and how we got here. So if my slides will work, there we go. A little intro. So one of the things that's really important to me, especially as I've developed my career in technology and engineering and education, how we introduce ourselves is a lot more than just what we do. So, and it also has a significant and direct impact into how we think about the work that we do. And for me, Hack the Hood work is heart work. So I'm a womanist, that's my worldview. And I bring that to developing this curriculum. My favorite job that I've ever had is STEM fairy godmother. And that's basically the relationships that I've developed with students and mentees and young people over the years, where I feel great if I can help make their STEM dream of the moment come true, whether that is, some new study strategies, whether that is, prep for that interview, or, giving feedback on a project, or even, like some of the more significant things like choosing to stay in majors, choosing to stay in school. Those are things that I feel are the relationships that have driven what I think are the most important things around STEM education. And I'm an engineer by training, but I really am an engineer for the people. My science is for the streets. And social justice builder, maker, and seeker. So those are all things that come for me, provide context into why I do this and why I think it's important for Hack the Hood to occupy this particular space. I put a couple things here. When we think about educational systems, we have to think about them as ecosystems. And there's a really great quote from one of my mentors, one of my STEM fairy godmothers, from her book, Lessons from Plants. And Veranda Montgomery says, when a plant is not doing well, people examine the environment, nutrients, light, caretaking, because the default expectation is that plants should grow. No one looks at the plant and thinks it is incapable of greening. No one tries to teach plants how to be better plants. And that same thinking applies to how we think about our learners and thinking about the classroom. So if we create the environment with the right tools and resources, if we are good caretakers of those young people that are in our care, they will grow, they will learn. And instead of, saying you have to be a better student, you have to be a better learner, we focus on the environment. And another just quote from Toni Morrison that I love, but this is what we hope for our students as well, is that I tell my students, when you get these jobs that you've been so brilliantly trained for, just remember that your real job is that if you are free, you need to free someone else. If you have some power, then your job is to empower somebody else. And this is not just a grab bag candy game. And this is a value that is built into our curriculum and something that I think is really our goal. We want our learners to be able to go through this experience, not just learn how to code, not just to get a great job, these are all important things, but that they are able to free themselves and understand and contribute to freeing others as well. So now let's get into why you all are here. Technical benevolence. We're going to talk about social entrepreneurship and how this shows up in marginalized communities. And we'll have a good conversation, but hopefully you'll be able to take away some new lessons and new thoughts around this topic. So we have 3 sections that are the formal lesson, and then I'll wrap us up with some of what I call the secret sauce, some of the thinking behind our curriculum. So, and this is very participatory in Hack the Hood spirit, where does social good and technology come together? So if you can in the chat, go ahead and drop some examples. Maybe it's a company, maybe it's a product or a service, but what is something that you have seen as a social good that has used technology to achieve that goal? And it could be anything. So go ahead and drop it in the chat, any ideas you might have. I will look here. Benevity, I'm not familiar with that one, but that is interesting. It sounds potentially like, is it like a lending thing? Maybe. Amber Alerts, yup. I live in Texas, we get them all the time. Amber Alerts are a way that, when there's something wrong, we get this alert on our phone to let us know to be on the lookout. Zipline, using drone technology to deliver blood transfusions. That's a cool one. All right, so take some time. Social media activism. I really want to create a whole module on just that. There's some really interesting things there. I was fortunate to do a panel watch a panel this past weekend. We're talking about how social media has influenced activism around Haiti and Tigray. So really interesting things. I know I wouldn't have known anything about Tigray until I saw it on social media. All right, so take a few minutes, think about this. You'll get some examples and some opportunities to think of other examples, but let's get into it. What is social entrepreneurship? So we want to give a definition here. Social entrepreneurship is developing a company or a solution to address a community, cultural, or environmental issue. So a lot of times when we're thinking about entrepreneurship, we're just thinking about going out, founding the next startup, being the next Meta, being the next Twitter, whatever it might be. And those organizations might have some aspect of social good, but it's not necessarily core to their purpose. They're trying to make money. One of the things when we're thinking about social entrepreneurship is how we can use our company, whether we're developing a technology or a product or a service, to actually have a positive impact on the community, on the environment, and that we're accountable to those things in addition to making some money as well, because we live in capitalism. So social entrepreneurship is a little bit different than typical entrepreneurship that we might think of. There are really large companies that do social entrepreneurship kinds of work. They're called B Corps. B corporations really have a legal obligation to balance their purpose, which is a social purpose, as well as profit. So because they have this particular designation, they are accountable to their workers, to customers, to suppliers, community, and the environment in ways that a typical company may not be. So there's a really rigorous process by which a company can apply to become a B Corp. You can go to bcorporation.net and learn a whole bunch more. But what B Corps do you all know? There might be some items or products from B Corps that are on your desk right now. My desk is actually from a B Corp. Athleta, yes. Well, there's a few. Let's think about them. Any products that we buy? Numi tea. I'm like literally looking on my desk. Ben & Jerry's, woohoo, Patagonia, yes. Climate tech, yes. So there's lots of different examples. Here are a few brands that many of us have purchased or bought. I had my Ben & Jerry's last night. The Body Shop, that's one of my favorite ones, especially like traveling. They have great little small size things and they're really great to their workers. I think they're awesome. Warby Parker, seventh generation. Those of us who still buy paper products like me, at least I try to buy the seventh generation paper towels instead of just the regular Brawny or whatever. But when we're thinking about these companies, these are just some of the big brand companies, but there's lots of others. So if you think of others, go ahead and drop them in the chat. Yes, Sasha, you got more than one right. But there are plenty of these companies, and we see not just in like the branding and the products that they develop, but thinking about the way that they engage with community. Ben & Jerry's has always been, since the age of social media, really good at their social media engagement around issues. Many companies end up following them to look for Toms. Yes, Toms is another one. Because every pair of Toms that you buy, another pair gets donated to a child that doesn't have shoes. So when we're thinking about all of these kinds of products, and many of us, when we're out shopping, we're coming into the fourth quarter, it's holiday, consumerism season, and sometimes we might want to get some products that have a more than a social good. It's more than just the switch on my desk that I play in between that doesn't necessarily do much for others. But we might want to think about some of the ways that we are consuming products that have positive impacts to others and not just stuff that we are accumulating. All right. So there's lots of ways that companies get it wrong. We talked about some that get it right. They're attentive to their community. They're accountable to the environment. They're thoughtful about the give backs that they provide. But there's lots of ways that companies can get it wrong. So not talking about any specific companies here, but you may have heard of some of these solutions where technology was brought to bear to address a social concern and it backfired. So how about an AI solution to identify diverse candidates, but it ends up eliminating them more frequently or biasing them in a different way? Maybe a medical record and geographic system that might help us identify patients who are more sick, but we could end up stigmatizing people, or we end up identifying patients who just spend more money on healthcare and go to the doctor more often and consume more pharmaceuticals. We can also think about developing a social network for your neighborhood to develop community, but not attentive to the ways that gentrification have changed who lives in the community and who engages with a particular product or service. So these are just some ways that what might seem like a important but innocuous sort of social issue, that we can get it all wrong when we apply technology in ways that are not very thoughtful. So what does all this have to do with the idea of technical benevolence? When we're thinking about technical benevolence, I really lean on Ruha Benjamin in Race After Technology. She dedicates a chapter focused on the idea of technical benevolence. And she defines it as tech products and services that offer fixes for social bias or social issues, but still end up reproducing or even deepening discriminatory processes. So we can think about the ways that sometimes fintech has, maybe provided access to faux banking for folks who are unbanked, but ends up exploiting them in different ways. We can think about, some of the examples I talked about where we're trying to develop community, but end up marginalizing community. But there's lots of ways where we might have this idea that a technology solution will fix a problem, a social problem, without necessarily fully analyzing that from end to end. A lot of times this is important in social entrepreneurship because a great technical idea can be developed by a team of people that, they have really good intentions and they have their own version of fairness or rightness, and apply that to the technology. And sometimes that backfires. There are some other ways that we can talk about these issues. There's technochauvinism. So technochauvinism is simply the idea that technology always provides the best solution. So if anyone here works in tech or has worked in tech, this is one of those things, when you see it, you know it, right? It's, oh, well, let's just do this, and then we've solved that problem, without really thinking about the full context. Meredith Broussard, she defines technochauvinism in her book, and she coined the phrase in her book, Artificial Unintelligence, how computers misunderstand the world. So this idea that computers are always going to be right, we know that that's not true. And I'm sure that all of us have had plenty of times, heck, trying to sign into today's Zoom, where technology did not work the way that we wanted it to work, or the way that we expected it to work. And sometimes technology isn't just the right solution. There's also this idea of techno-colonialism. And here, when we're thinking about techno-colonialism, this is when we're really starting to have a conflict of culture and a conflict of interests, but also there's this element of exploitation. So the idea is very similar, but by introducing a specific kind of technology, communities might be exploited. So one of the examples that we talked about in preparing this is I had a great conversation with the team a few months ago about home video security cameras. And, when we're thinking about maybe like gentrifying neighborhoods and neighborhoods that are changing, the folks that want a Ring or whatever kind of video camera are essentially like adding some version of colonization into that space. And there might be good intentions, with these efforts. A lot of times we can see them happening in the global South. We see them happening in Africa. We see them happening in places that most of us are just not necessarily paying attention to or thinking in detail about. And these products and services are pitched as good for humanitarian purposes, but they end up causing harm, especially to communities that are already marginalized. All right, so I talked a lot. It's time for you all to talk to each other. So we're gonna have a short little breakout. And I'm giving you these ideas around technical benevolence, techno-chauvinism, techno-colonialism, and we all probably have some ideas of like times that we've seen this go wrong. So in a breakout, I've given you a couple questions here. Have you heard of or witnessed an example of technical benevolence? How did it happen? Maybe if you were on a product team or related to that particular product or service. How or when did people find out that the solution didn't work or caused harm? Very often the news stories that we see are because no one checked before we release this particular feature out into the world. And users and advocates are the ones who identified it. But how and when did we find out that the solution didn't work? And then what was done to correct the issue, if anything? Very often these issues are just allowed to propagate because they just can. But if there was something done to correct the issue, what was it? And then what do you think teams can do to check for these perspectives in their work? how can teams be accountable to each other, to the community, by checking for these issues of technical benevolence, technochauvinism, and technocolonialism? So we're going to spend about 5-ish minutes, 15-second introduction. We don't need your whole life story, just who you are, what you do, why why you're here. And then you can pick any question that seems relevant to you, and we'll spend about 5 minutes. So I think Samia is going to send us off into breakout land. I hope. So hopefully also had a chance to share some examples of technical benevolence and where things go wrong, really wrong. Some of them are really dramatic. My group got to talk about, also being a technologist in the place of doing these things, and how to, the feeling around like, oh, this doesn't seem right. And like that kind of intuition and affirming that in the technical space and the technical learning environment is one of the things that we really hope that our learners get out of both this curriculum as well as our technical curriculum, because very often I like to think about the idea of change from inside the belly of the beast, because if we forever have the same people with the same perspectives designing our technology, we'll forever have the same problems. And if we don't apply a different way of thinking, diverse ways of thinking, and various perspectives, value structures, then we may not be able to make the kind of progress that we'd like to see. All right, back into the lesson. Hopefully, and I think everyone can see my screen. Yes. All right. So talking about values, ain't no tech without us. And it's really important for us at Hack the Hood to think about how our values are related to the curriculum that we're offering to our learners. This is one of my favorite values. I remember distinctly when we came up with this and everyone was excited, because the idea that technology is a gift to everyone is not exactly true. It's not true. The idea that, technology, and you can say the industry, you can say technology developers, the people that are making gazillions of dollars off of our participation in technology, couldn't do it without us. There is no technology without the cultural experiences and capital and engagement of communities of color, of Black and Brown communities. My favorite parallel, Ayana's gonna like this, is, when we're thinking about TikTok creators and how, there are so many people that are presenting and putting out all this really interesting, great content on TikTok. And that is the reason why people are on the platform, and we can also even see how the algorithms are often biased to amplify the copycats, not the originators, and that's problematic. And when we're thinking about technical benevolence, a way that we can avoid these kinds of issues is affirming and thinking through the idea that there ain't no tech without us. So I'm going to give you some examples, a couple case studies. So this particular example, and this is where we do our case studies. In every module, we offer a little bit of a real life example of that particular technology and potentially the people that have developed it or are using it for good purposes. So, staying connected wherever you go is a pretty straightforward sort of idea. BridgeFi was developed by Jorge Rios, former school teacher. So shout out to all the teachers. And he developed BridgeFi in 2015. So all of us, many of us, have a smartphone that sometimes, your Wi-Fi might be messed up. Sometimes your connection to network isn't great. I was talking to Anina last week and I jumped in the car. My phone was not trying to connect to anything. So we know that sometimes you can't get access to the internet. You can't get access to your connection, whether that is through your phone, through your laptop or whatever. The idea around BridgeFi is that Jorge wanted to develop a solution that can help enable digital communication when there's limited or no cell signal. And oftentimes that might happen in an emergency. So I live in Texas, in Dallas, not in Houston. So the example that happened this past weekend at the concert, there's no cell service when you have thousands of people all together. And in an emergency situation, how are you going to communicate? How are you going to be able to tell, your folks that you're safe, that you're okay? Because there was also no cell phone service during this whole concert experience. So, and many of us have probably been to a concert. You can be standing right there in Las Vegas on the Strip and have zero service, right? And how you might get an Uber to your next location, how you might say, hey, I'm good, catch up with the friend that you got separated from in the crowd can be really complicated. Plus, let's just think about a disaster. So again, I don't know why Texas has all of these awful examples, but we had the ice storm. We had no power for 4 or 5 days. And that also meant very limited communication. When we're thinking about disasters that happen, oftentimes your cell phone signal is unavailable. The whole concept with BridgeFi was to address some of these issues because Jorge knew from experience, from living in rural areas, from being in disaster areas, that when vital communication networks go down, there's not a good way to be able to communicate. BridgeFi is a really cool kind of web of availability. So on your smart device, you have Bluetooth, and with your Bluetooth and BridgeFi, you can communicate within a 330-foot range. So if you lose your friend at the concert, if there is, heaven forbid, an earthquake, and you're not sure if you can get to the other side of the house, having this app allows you to be able to communicate within close proximity with the specific use cases for rural neighborhoods, for instances like where there's really big crowds. But this was, I thought, a really cool example of how you might overcome a specific issue and do it in the right way, because Jorge was really bringing his experience around, being in an earthquake, around being in rural places, and thinking about all the different ways that people might need to connect, and that connection might not be as readily available. This app was also really, really helpful for protesters in 2020. So anyone who is active on the streets kind of protester, you have to be prepared for certain things. And depending on the groups that you're with, you might have BridgeFi as your means of communication, because we've seen, especially globally, instances where the government shuts down all the cell phone towers to stop you from communicating. And this kind of technology is a way to work around that and make sure that people can be in touch with each other when they need to. So here's another example. Jasmine Crow, I love her. She's a HBCU alum, North Carolina Central University in Durham. And Jasmine is the founder of Gooder. And she always used to call herself a do-gooder, that she always wanted to just do good things for people. And we all know that there's not a reason in the United States, especially, for anyone to go hungry, but it happens every single day. And we have a lot of places where there's always surplus food: restaurants, airports, hospitals, schools, places where they are preparing mass amounts of food that goes to waste because it's either expired or didn't sell or whatever. And that mass amount of waste usually ends up in a landfill. So Jasmine created her company Gooder to with the idea to develop software to help these large places that have significant amounts of food keep track of their inventory, so they're reducing their food waste. Also connecting them with local nonprofits that provide food for people that need it, especially food that's on the cusp of spoil, or even just surplus. So the way that this works is that she sells companies and hospitals and restaurants the software, connects them with these nonprofits with the software, also helps those companies reduce their tax liability through their donations that are well monitored through the software tool. She recently just opened up a grocery store basically in her own middle school in Georgia, where students whose families are experiencing food insecurity can go into the store and get whatever food that they might need for their families. So I thought this was also another really interesting example of technical benevolence gone right, where Jasmine put her intentions around making sure that we close the food waste gap. And another piece is that they also do composting of food that is spoiled, which is really great. So we're reducing our, landfill contributions and making sure that we can have a more complete cycle when it comes to food production in the US. So her company, Gooder, is another example of where we can do the right thing with the technology tools that we develop. So when we go through these little case studies, we always want to think about what are the ways that we can apply these ideas. Now we've got some inspiration. So what's a community issue that you think tech could solve? If you have an idea, throw it in the chat. And the way that the structure of this is just thinking through the identifying the issue. Why is this issue important for Black, Latinx, and Indigenous communities? What is the data or the tech solution? And then also, how might you come up with the right solution? Yes, Jean, you're right. Food waste does contribute to CO2 emissions as well. We don't need a warmer planet. All right. So I'm going to skip the video because we're almost out of time, but we also want to offer a functional example. When we are trying to do work in technology that has a positive impact for communities, we'll do it with participatory research. So a little video, but we'll skip that. But really the important idea is that with participatory research, we share a definition, an exploration of topics with communities around with the communities that are affected most by the topic. That means that we share the narrative around that issue. It means that we share power in meaningful ways. We share strategy on developing a solution, and we share the direction on the implementation of that solution. So I'm going to give you a fast secret sauce, really, really, really fast, because I'm excited about it. We have our educational philosophy. One of the things that's really important is that we want to have a justice-centered approach to data science education and literacy that supports liberation through action. Every one of our modules, the idea is that we introduce these topics, we give some case studies, we also prepare our learners to be able to take some kind of action, whether that is coming up with their own social entrepreneurship venture, whether that is contacting their elected representatives, whether that is, engaging in a service learning project with a community partner. We really want to ensure that we are also attentive to justice for our learners in the process. And one of the things that I'm really excited about when it comes to our educational philosophy is how we think about our learners. They're transformative intellectuals who exhibit complexity, commitment, and credibility. That what they bring to the table is incredibly important and must be affirmed and supported throughout the process. So anyone can teach technical stuff, and anyone can help learners present their practical skills in ways that help them get jobs. We've got that down pat. We know how to do that. At Hack the Hood, the things that I think are really important and differentiate us from other folks in the educational technology space is one, thinking about intersectional tech identity development, that our learners, again, are powerful individuals and intellects in their own rights. Their experiences matter, and how we help them develop their technical skills and support their identity along the process so they don't have to assimilate when they show up to that junior engineering role is critical. And then also thinking about social justice and community, how do we ensure that social justice is at the core of technology? It's not the way that traditional higher education, K-12 education thinks about teaching folks around technology. Social justice, like what? I have a paper, that I need to write one day. Thinking about STEM as social justice, we have ways that we can advance social justice goals, community goals with technology. And the goal is with our program to be able to accomplish that. And if we do nothing else, we want to have a liberative technical education, that learners are empowered, that they're knowledgeable, that they can be engaged citizens, consumers in the world, especially when it comes to technology. And we hope that we are helping our learners get toward that future that they imagine and want with those critical data skills. So we're a little over, but thank you for hanging in with me. And I'm gonna turn it over to Anita.
Thanks for that, Lauren. I mean, it's just heart expanding and always a joy to hear you talk about all of this work. So yeah, I mean, I think this goes without saying, but we want to share this curriculum widely with others. We want to be able to keep building it. Lauren has a long list of other units she wants to create in addition to ones we already have. So if you're excited about it, a few ways to get involved. We're launching our year-end campaign soon. Funding is always the way we continue to do this work and build. So keep an eye on kind of your social media and email inboxes for that when it launches. I'll hand it to Samia on the curriculum sharing side.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're interested in becoming a curriculum sharing partner, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm always inspired every time I hear Lauren go through this stuff. And this is one of many modules that Lauren has created. So I'm happy to connect with anyone who's interested in becoming a curriculum sharing partner. So I will drop my email here and feel free to reach out.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. And I can hang out if you have questions or want to chat. I am all yours.
Thanks again, everyone.
Yay, fun times.
Hey, yeah, I want to chat.
Oh, goodness.